Hi, my name is Patrianto. I'm a linguist at the Language Office of East Java, and currently I'm a student at Victoria University of Wellington. Today I will talk about the object voice in Javanese. Particularly, I'm going to discuss the subject and topic in this construction. All the data discussed in this presentation are from the Surabaya dialect mainly spoken in Surabaya and its neighboring places. Surabaya Javanese has two constructions, the active voice and object voice. In example 1a, the active voice is indicated by a nasal prefix ng, printed in red color, attached to the verb hug. The canonical position of the subject is in the preverbal position as shown by the noun phrase city. The object takes the postverbal position as shown by the noun phrase that child. The object voice construction, as in example 1b, is characterized by the absence of voice morphology, but there is an initiator proclitic, printed in green color here, attached to the verb. The proclitic is restricted only for first person and second person. The object voice construction can have the theme appear before the verb. Therefore, we can see the noun phrase that child takes the preverbal position. Since the preverbal position is optional, we can also find the theme takes the postverbal position. In example 2b, we find the noun phrase that child appear after the verb hug. From these two phenomena, we have two different structures. In active voice construction, we have the initiator and then the verb and finally the theme. In object voice construction, we have the initiator attached to the verb and a preverbal or postverbal theme. We have seen that in object voice construction, the theme, which I will refer to as the pivot in this paper, may optionally appear before or after the proclitic verb complex. Based on this phenomenon, there are two questions I would like to raise. The first question, is the pivot a topic or a subject? There are two hypotheses to answer this question. Hypothesis A, the pivot is actually a topic, as proposed by Davis 1993 for Javanese. Hypothesis B, the subject serves as the pivot as suggested by Suhandana 1994 for Javanese, Aldrich 2004 for Indonesian, and Leggett 2014 for Chinese. The second question, is the proclitic a subject or an ergative agent? Again, there are two hypotheses. Hypothesis A, the proclitic is actually a subject. Hypothesis B, the proclitic is an ergative agent as proposed by Suhandana 1994 for Javanese and Nurhayani 2014 for Central Javanese. In this paper, I will argue for hypothesis A, pivot as a topic for question 1, based on three arguments. First, a topic will have definiteness constraints. Second, a reflexive pronoun has the possibility of becoming a topic. And third, the topic can be a prepositional phrase. These three characteristics will not be found in a subject. For question 2, I will argue for the hypothesis A, the proclitic is actually a subject. The main argument for this is that the proclitic can be a theme. In addition, since the pivot is in the topic position, not the subject position, we may expect that Surabaya Javanese has a subject slot available for the proclitic. So here is how the presentation is organized. The main discussion will begin with the evidence for the preverbal theme as a topic, which are the binding relation facts, the definiteness constraints in topic, and the topic's ability to take prepositional phrases. Next, I will discuss the evidence for the proclitic as a subject. It will involve unaccusatives and psychological verb constructions. After that, I will briefly talk about the implication that Javanese object voice can be a mirror of Philippine type non-actor voices. So, let us start the main discussion with the binding facts. The most effective strategy to test whether an argument is bound by another argument is to have that bound argument to appear as a reflexive pronoun. In Surabaya Javanese, the reflexive is expressed by the word dewe, which means self, that accompanies a certain word carrying the person information, the body person word. For myself, we have au aku dewe, as in 3 and 4a, which literally means my body self. For yourself, we have awakmu dewe, as in 4b, which means your body self. Cross-linguistically, a reflexive pronoun cannot take the subject position. That's why the active voice construction in sample 3 is ungrammatical. Here, the reflexive pronoun that takes the position before the active voice verb like makes the sentence ungrammatical, because the preverbal position in active voice construction is a subject, and hence the reflexive pronoun doesn't have any argument to serve as its antecedent. On the contrary, a reflexive pronoun may take the preferable position in object-voice construction. In 4a, the reflexive first-person pronoun myself precedes the first-person initiator and verb complex like. In 4b, the reflexive second-person pronoun yourself is in the position before the second-person initiator and verb hate. The reflexive pronoun is able to occupy the pre-initiator verbal position because a topic is actually an a-bar element. Therefore, its binding relation should be interpreted in its theta position. In examples 4a and b, the original or the theta position of the reflexive is the theme position. That's why the initiator proclitic can serve as the antecedent. The fact that a pre-verbal reflexive can be bound by an argument appear after it only makes sense if the reflexive is assumed to be in an a-bar position, which is the topic position, instead of in the subject position, which is an a position. The second argument for the pivot as a topic is the definiteness constraint. In object-voice construction, the pivot has to be definite. So in example 5, the sentence is only grammatical when the object pivot bag has the definite marker a. So the only acceptable reading for it is the bag, not a bag. This definiteness constraint doesn't appear in the object of actor voice construction. Therefore, in example 6, the object bag can have a definite marker or not, and the possible reading can be either the bag or a bag. In actor voice constructions, however, the definiteness constraint applies to the subjects, the same with the pivots in object voice constructions. In 7a, the preverbal arguments man of the actor voice verb see needs to have a definite marker which is expressed by the demonstrative that. The use of indefinite argument will result in ungrammatical sentence. Meanwhile, the object goes can be definite or not. Similarly, the subject argument person in 7b before the unaccusatory verb jump has to be definite. Whenever the subject is indefinite, the sentence will be ungrammatical. The third argument for the pivot as a topic is its ability to take prepositional phrases. In 8a, the pivot, which is in the sentence initial position, is filled by an instrument prepositional phrase with nail. In 8b, the pivot is filled by a locative prepositional phrase to Jakarta. In 8c, the recent prepositional phrase because of alcohol takes the pivot position. In 8d, the pivot is a beneficiary prepositional phrase for you. In 8e, it is a commutative prepositional phrase with Maria that becomes the pivot. When the pivot position is filled by a prepositional phrase, the theme DP can optionally stay in post-verbal position. In addition, when in post-verbal position, the theme DP can be indefinite marked. I will show you this later. So in examples 8a to 8e, which I repeat here, you can see the theme DPs printed in blue color are all in the post-verb position. In 8a, the theme DP the picture appears after the verb hang. In 8b, after the verb sent, we find the theme DP the letter. In 8c, the theme DP that person follows the verb kick. In 8d, the theme DP the door appear after the verb open. In 8e, there is the theme DP the house after the verb clean. Previously, we have seen that the pivot bears the definiteness constraint. Consequently, when a prepositional phrase fills the pivot slot, it needs to be definite as well. So in example 9a, even though there is no definite marker found, the garden has to be interpreted as definite. Therefore, the only possible reading is the garden, not a garden. Similarly, house in 9b has to be interpreted as definite, which is the house, not a house. With the prepositional phrase filling the pivot slot and the theme DP stays in post-verbal position, the theme DP no longer needs to be definite marked. Example 10a has a post-verbal theme DP any flower. As indicated by the word any, the flower is indefinite marked. It can be any flower or any kind of flower. In example 10b, the theme DP knife in the post-verbal position doesn't refer to any definite or specific knife. The WH and the word AE indicates that the knife can be any knife or any kind of knives. In Surabaya Javanese, a hanging topic printed in purple color here may precede the pivot slot, and it can be either a DP or a PP. Different from pivot, a hanging topic is not strictly subject to the definiteness constraint. In example 11, the prepositional phrase in-house is before the noun phrase the car. Both phrases appear preferably. The prepositional phrase in-house is a hanging topic. Therefore, it can be interpreted as either definite in the house or indefinite in a house. However, the noun phrase which occupies that pivot slot needs to be definite, so it has to take the definite marker and be interpreted as definite, the car. In example 12, the hanging topic is filled by an indefinite DP, several flowers. The pivot slot is occupied by the PP, in garden. To force an indefinite reading on the pivot, I use the WH and the word AE. The result is with the WH and the word AE used, hence the indefinite reading, the form is ungrammatical. The hanging topic, on the other hand, doesn't need to be definite as indicated by the indefinite marker several. A pivot prepositional phrase can also take a post-verbal position. As shown by example 13, the prepositional phrase for him or person follows the theme DP any flower. Here, since the prepositional phrase serves as a pivot, it has to be definite. Therefore, the grammatical form is the definite PP for him, while the indefinite for person is ungrammatical. The theme DP, on the other hand, can be indefinite marked as indicated by the WH and the word AE, which means any. From the discussion on the evidence for the PP, not the theme, as the true pivot, we can learn that the pivot phrase in Japanese object-voice construction can be either a theme DP or a PP. Then, only the pivot phrase is subject to the definiteness constraint, and both features indicate that the pivot is best analyzed as a topic, not a subject, since cross-linguistically the subject position can only be occupied by DPs and CPs, and only topics, not subjects, are subject to definiteness constraints. Therefore, to answer the first question raised in this paper, is the pivot phrase a topic or a subject? The hypothesis A, pivot as a topic, proves to be the favorable answer since the pivot has definiteness constraint, can be a reflexive, and can be a prepositional phrase. After discussing the evidence for the pivot as topic, I will discuss the evidence to support the claim that proclitic is actually a subject. The discussion will involve unaccusatives and constructions with psychological verbs. After that, I will briefly mention about the implication that Japanese object construction can be a mirror of Philippine type non-actor voices. Finally, I will finish my discussion with a conclusion. The first evidence about the function of proclitic as a subject comes from unaccusatives. It is widely accepted that unaccusative verbs don't take an agent, but an undergoer instead. In example 14, the first person proclitic, printed in green color, is attached to the unaccusative verb fall. The verb is followed by a locative prepositional phrase into the ravine. Here it is clear that it is the first person proclitic who is undergoing the effect of the unaccusative verb fall. In example 15, the locative prepositional phrase in the bathroom takes the sentence initial position. The first person proclitic is attached to the passive voice verb slip. So the only interpretation of this sentence is that it is the first person proclitic that slipped in the bathroom. In 16, the first person proclitic is attached to the unaccusative faint. Therefore, the one who fainted is the first person proclitic. The proclitic can also be the second person as shown in 17. Here the second person proclitic is attached to the unaccusative verb fall. The ability of the proclitics to take unaccusative verbs indicates that the proclitic cannot be an agent licensed with ergative case, as ergative case is supposed to be unavailable in unaccusative clause and incapable to be assigned to undergoers. Other than unaccusative verbs, the proclitics can also take psychological verbs and function as undergoer-like experiencers. In example 19, the first person proclitic, again printed in green color, is attached to the psi verbs worry. In 20, the proclitic is attached to the psi verb irritate, and in 21, the first proclitic takes the psi verb afraid. Furthermore, the stimulus of the event can be modified by an agent-oriented adverb. This confirms that the proclitic is indeed an undergoer rather than an initiator or agent. In 22 and 23, the agent-oriented adverb secretly modifies the WH agent, while the second person proclitic takes the psychological verbs sad and afraid respectively. The proclitic therefore can be either an agent as in 25 and 26 or an undergoer as in 24 and other examples we have just discussed. In 25, the first person proclitic takes an unergative verb dance and therefore clearly an agent. In 26, the transitive verb kick has the first person proclitic as the agent of the action kick. Recall that the second question is asking whether the proclitic initiator is a subject or an ergative agent. Based on the evidence that the proclitic is able to take unaccusative verbs and psych verbs and hence can be a theme, I argue that hypothesis A, the proclitic is a subject, not only an ergative agent, is the best answer for question 2. Let's go back to example 8, which demonstrates the ability of pivot to take various PPs. The example implies that the Javanese object-voice construction might preserve the Philippine type syntax, since the pivot can be filled by instrument PP as in 8A, locative PP as in 8B, reason PP as in 8C, beneficiary PP as in 8D, and commutative PP as in 8E. To make the Philippine type language syntax more visual, I'm using Paiwan, an Austronesian language spoken in southern Taiwan, as an example. In Paiwan, a pivot is signaled by the pivot marker A. The voice alternation correlates with the change of the pivot marker position. In actor voice, the pivot marker is located next to the agent man, as in 1A. In 1B, the pivot marker is next to the patient pig, makes the sentence a patient voice construction. The locative voice construction of 1C is indicated by the pivot marker next to the location noun mountain, and in 1D, the pivot marker placed before the instrumental noun spear indicates that the sentence is instrumental voice construction. In conclusion, the two basic constructions in Surabaya Javanese are best analyzed as subject-topic construction and object-topic construction respectively. 1A is an example of subject-topic construction in which the subject city also serves as the pivot and hence occupies the topic position. 1B is an example of object-voice construction in which the theme is actually a pivot and hence fills the topic position, not the subject position. Further, the subject position in object-voice construction is occupied by the proclitic. Therefore, there are two key implications. First, Javanese object-voice constructions are not ergative aligned. Second, Javanese object-voice constructions might be structurally different from those in Achinese and Indonesian, which have been argued to possess a theme subject with ergative proclitic, as proposed by Legate 2014 and Aldrich 2004. Well, this is the end of my presentation. On the screen, you are now reading the references I used in the paper. Finally, thank you so much for watching my video, and I look forward for your feedbacks. Goodbye.